it is that Dave Smart has been hired to Grant McCaslin's Texas Tech staff, which is a hire that, frankly, is probably the best assistant coach hire, if not in this offseason, maybe ever in college basketball. Like it's absolutely absurd, and yet I would say that American college basketball fans have no idea why this is such an absurd hire. So I had to turn to the Canadian John Rothstein, Jordan Henry, to explain to the people. Jordan, I guess start with that. Why explain to everybody who Dave Smart is, why this is such a big deal, and what's going on here, why this is news.
I mean, first off, I think you're bang on. It's easily a home run for best hire of, this coaching cycle of hires, but I think it's the greatest coaching hire, not just in collegiate basketball history, but I think in sporting history. If you just want to look at Dave Smart's track record and resume, his ability to win and breed winners. I mean, the stat I'll throw at you right away, he's won 17 of the 20 last national championships north of the border. I mean, that's an absurd statistic. And it's not he's won quite a few. I guess our conference is more, regionalized within states instead of spreading state borders, kind of like the American markets do. But, the Ontario, I guess, provincial, but it's really our conference. I wouldn't he's less successful in those than he is in national championships. He knows how to win on the biggest stage. He knows how to recruit. He knows how to coach. He knows how to bring guys together. And he's the greatest coach easily in Canadian basketball history. And I'm just excited for the guy to finally get his opportunity to show himself on the big stage at Texas Tech.
So I guess the obvious question I have is why would he do this? If he's such a legend, he wins national titles in Canada. To my knowledge, my hasty research I did before we sat down here, it seems like he spent his entire life in Ontario. What's the play here? It's cool. It's great for college basketball. It's great for Texas Tech. If I was a Tech fan, I would be very excited. I'm just trying to understand what's the motivation, do we suppose, behind Dave Smart even wanting to take this job? Because he's an assistant coach now. You're the head coach. You've won 17 national titles as a head coach to then become a Texas Tech assistant when I don't know what the connection is with him in Texas. It's very confusing, but I love it for our sport.
He's kind of stepped back a little bit with Carlton. He still works for the university up until this past season. After 18-19 was his last year as the head coach of Carlton. And then a gentleman by the name of Taffy Charles took over the head coaching duties, and he kind of took a step back, and he was still involved in practices, and he was the most active director of basketball ops you've ever seen on a sideline at a basketball game.
So he's Coach K.
He's literally Coach K. Yeah,
Coach K is doing for Duke right now. Yeah,
but I honestly think it's probably a challenge that he was looking to try and challenge himself with. The last couple of years, he's kind of bounced around and done a few different things instead of continuously coaching this Carlton team. I mean, he got hired by the Ottawa Senators back in 2019. He helped them with some of their defensive mindsets and, just kind of team building and, championship. The hockey. He was essentially an NHL life coach for a couple of years there, just telling the Ottawa Senators how to dig deep on defense. If there's a team who's going to defensively improve, Texas Tech is going to be another one too. I just took a quick glance at this
Barstool Sportsbook
before we hopped on here. 95-1 for a national championship this upcoming season. With Dave's track record, it's not the worst way to spend $5 that I can think of for sure.
Yeah. I guess do we think this is a stepping stone for him? Do you think he's going to try to become an American Division I head coach? I mean, is this
this is definitely not the first time he's had an opportunity to make a move like this. I mean, with his track record in Canada, we've seen coaches that were kind of at his level, some of the greatest coaches, especially in the Ontario Conference, man by the name of Roy Rana, who was the head coach at the university I attended. He made his jump. He made his move. He left Ryerson University. He jumped to the Sacramento Kings and was an assistant coach there for a couple of seasons. And now he's the head coach of Egypt's national team program there. So I wouldn't I would assume it's definitely a stepping stone, but I think he wanted to get himself somewhere like Texas Tech to get him into a conference that's going to get him some bigger games and get himself a little bit more on the stage. Because I mean, you're having me on to kind of explain who this guy is when if his resume was as well known as it should be, he wouldn't have to take an assistant coaching job to kind of get his name well known in circles.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that live and breathe basketball kind of knew the magnitude of this, but I think it's fair to say that there aren't a lot of American college basketball fans that are paying attention to what's going on north of the border. So like, you have to forgive us for not. I knew because you used to come on all my old shows and we'd talk about how good Carlton was and all that. But I think you have to forgive the American fan for not understanding how dominant this guy has been. But I guess I'm thinking about what the listeners right now are probably thinking, which is like, this is great. The man won 17. What did you say? 17 out of 19.
17 out of 20 national.
17 out of 20 national championships. Is this a situation where he almost won too much to where it's no longer impressive, because by winning so many national championships, you're saying less about how good you are as a coach, and you're now saying it more speaks to how bad Canadian college basketball is. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like what is the competition? Yeah, do you see this as him being more dominant? That Canadian basketball, there's only like 4 or 5 good teams, and he happens to be one of them, and they, because like I'm thinking like the comparison I would probably make is like Gino Auriemma at UConn. Some of those national titles he was ripping off there for a while. It was like, there's 7 women coming out of high school that can play basketball, and 6 of them are committed to UConn. Like, I mean, on the one hand, yeah, congrats Gino, but also like this is, the scale's a little tilted in your favor. Is that what was going on in Canada, or is it just like he's built a dynasty through in a competitive market?
It's definitely more of a dynasty builder for him. I mean, the names he was recruiting, the players he was bringing in were kind of coming in as guys that, weren't your class A recruits, or, we often get guys that'll head south of the border and they'll play a year at, D2, low D1, a mid-major, and, play 6 minutes a night and kind of realize they want to go back up. And, we waive a transfer if you want to come back from the US to Canada. You don't have to sit out a year if you're transferring from an American institution back into a Canadian one. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't the guy that was loading up on those players. And he was kind of developing, like there'd be a guy sitting on the end of the bench and they'd win a national championship and he'd be playing 6 minutes a night and you'd have no idea who he was. And then he was a second team All-Canadian the next year because he finally got a year into the system. He's a player developer. He's got a really good eye for bringing guys in, but like they're a big we not me team, even though that, they've got the most national players of the year since he started coaching the program. But that's less on recruiting the best players and just having the best talent, and more being the best coach and the best culture.
So what is it? What are like the hallmarks of Carlton program? Like what is it that he's bringing to Texas Tech?
It's 100% the defense. Like if you when he
Tech
like
fans
he
are gonna
runs,
love that. They're gonna love that. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's, if you're not fully engaged on defense, he'll take his best offensive players out. Like they're, everyone's engaged on both ends of the floor. Guys are, flying up and down, not afraid to go down low and, use the big man, a little bit of a traditional aspect, but like he'll stretch the 3 with some longer guys too. He'll get his big men involved both beyond the arc and down low. But at the same time too, like he's not adverse to, putting the big guy on the block and letting him go to work. So I wouldn't say so much that there's a huge offensive twist that he's going to be looking to put on a team as an assistant coach. But what I expected as soon as I saw the news yesterday was he's really going to be putting a touch on this Texas Tech team with his defensive abilities.
Which is what Texas Tech basketball is to everybody, is like they just play insane defense and tough-nosed defense. So that's exciting that the brand's still going to be there for Texas Tech. So what does this mean for Carlton? Is the Carlton dynasty done now? They're the one, I mean, are my Calgary Dinos in a position to pick up the baton that's being dropped by Carlton here? Because I'm a diehard Calgary Dinos fan, as you know, Jordan.
Those Calgary Dinos do have one national championship in the last 20 years, which is only 4 teams can say that. Yeah. So
we remember that was a big day in my house. Yeah.
Yeah. You're still scraping champagne off the walls after that championship of the Titus household. Yeah. I wouldn't say it like I think, he stepped aside as a coach because I think he knew Taffy Charles, who has head coached the team the last 4 seasons, all national championships with Carlton. He's been a guy that I think they knew he was the head coach of the women's team when Dave was the head coach of the men's program. And I think they knew that we're going to lose this guy.
They hired the women's coach from to be the men's. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I think it was more Dave stepping into that director of basketball ops position because he knew, Taffy was younger and, he kind of wanted to give him an opportunity to be successful at the university that, I mean, Taffy's ready to run. I mean, he's won 4 straight national championships himself, and he was the head coach of all of those teams. And I think, what makes me believe that the dynasty's not over and will never be over, and I'll be 85 years old one day, and the number I'll look at you and say is, it's 98 of the last 110 national championships is, their ability to falter, like I mentioned in the conference playoffs. And, in the Ontario conference, it's only the 2 finalists that get an automatic bid into our national championship tournament, which is only 8 teams. But I mean, 2 years ago, they lost in a semifinal matchup, went into the national championship as a 7th seed and, ran the board and won a national championship that way.
So they're winning as like the number 1 seed where they're dominant and they're the best team all year, but then they also win national titles when it feels like it's not their year and they still find a way
they haven't won the provincial conference championship in a few years, but have won national championships in all of those seasons. Like it's almost like, and it's so weird, like the seeding, there's 6 teams, like the top 6 of the 8. If you're a conference champion, you can't be lower than 6. So sometimes you get like the Quebec champion, which is the best out of 5 or 6 teams, will then end up always being the 6th seed. So if you're really thinking national championships matter more than conference championships, the 3 seed is really the spot you want to be. And I don't know if that was always a conspiracy theory. I don't know if he ever was like, well, we should be 3 because we'll be set up to avoid the 1 seed and then beat them. And there's a lot of like Ontario conference rematches in the national championship, but that's interesting. That's going to happen just based on population size in the province.